Have you ever spent hours scrolling through Splice to find that perfect snare or clap sound, only to find that it doesn't sound nearly as good in your beat as it did on the platform? They're either too weak and it can't cut through the mix, or you turned up the volume and it's overpowering the rest of your track. If this sounds like you probably either haven't EQ'd your snare, or if you have EQ'd it, you probably haven't EQ'd it properly. And honestly, I get it. I mean, EQing is tough, super difficult to master. So that's what I want to talk about today is a simple, repeatable, three-step solution that you can apply to almost any snare that'll have it sounding tight, loud, while also sounding crispy and not being overpowering in the mix. So let's get to it. All right, so I've got a beat pulled up here that I've been working on recently. The reason I picked this beat specifically is the snares and claps were especially prominent, and I did this exact EQ method, which I generally do on snares to begin with. But I'll go ahead and play the beat for you so that we can kind of hear what we're listening to, and then we'll jump right in. All right, so that was the intro. Moving into the hook. Basically, here is the verse. This is what we're going to be focusing on. Okay, so you can hear the snare and clap sounds are really cutting through without being too much or being too overpowering or thuddy. They sound like they're sitting on top of the rest of the mix, which is kind of what you're shooting for with snares, claps, hi-hats, that sort of thing. So basically what I have is 4 of these sounds. I've got them all right here. So I made them green so you'd be able to see them. And the dark green one here is the most prominent, sort of meat of the snares. Additionally, I've got all 4 of them running to a makeshift bus. If you're not familiar with a bus, it's basically when you send, generally speaking, multiple signals to another mixer track, and that mixer track can then be manipulated with plugins. And when you do that, it'll affect all of the sounds that are in that bus. Right? So I can put compression and EQ on this bus here, and it'll do it to all of these. So if you don't understand what buses are, I'm going to have a video that's going to focus on those. Regardless, as far as the process for EQing these snares, I'm just going to focus on the one main snare, but I've ultimately done this to all of them. As far as the high-pass filter is concerned, it's just like I did on the hi-hat video, if you've seen that, where I start here at the bottom with the high-pass filter, and as I'm rolling up, or rolling to the right in this case, eventually I'm going to hit a point where it's too much high-pass filter, and it's going to sound very thin and tinny. And once I hit that point, I'm going to just roll it back. I'm going to find that sweet spot, and then we'll go from there. So no need to overthink it necessarily. I'll go ahead and play it dry, and then we'll engage the EQ. Once I hit this point, it's a bit much. So it's starting to sound thin. So I'm just going to roll this back until we hit the sweet spot, which is, as we know, around 250 in this case. But you'll have to find that, of course, whenever you're doing yours. Listen how it brings color back into the sound. All right, so it's subtle. Okay, so the next step as far as step 1 is concerned, if you will, part B of step 1 is boosting these low mids. I believe I did it around 650 or 700 hertz. And it's only going to be boosting by a couple of decibels. You don't want to increase the Q to make it skinny necessarily. These are more like wide sweeping EQ steps. So boost by about 2 or 3 decibels at about 700. And it'll bring out some of the character or the body of the snare. So I'll let you hear it without, and then I'll bring it in. Okay, and I'm going to gauge the EQ now. Now you're probably either thinking, wow, that doesn't make much of a difference, or that doesn't sound great. In any case, there's additional steps that you're going to want to do to, sort of round this out or polish it. That's the first step, though. So once you get that out of the way, you're going to move on to step 2. Okay, and step 2 is going to be boosting what I call contact point frequencies. Contact point is the main sort of transient sound. Just imagine when a drumstick is hitting the snare drum. The main sound that's created, then you'll have to find this, of course. It's usually between 800 and 3K roundabout, but you'll have to search for it, and I'll show you how to do that too. I basically did this in another EQ with the F6 here. And when I did it initially, I'd done it with dynamic EQ. There's no reason to do that. If you want to just use the same EQ, that's fine. But I find I have more control with multiple EQs. So I'm going to bring up the F6 here. And I will play it again dry and then bring in this F6 so you can hear the difference. And then I'll show you how to find those contact point frequencies. Okay, now with the EQ. Okay, so again, it's not polished and it's not going to cut through the mix much at this stage. However, bringing out the contact point frequencies is a great way of increasing some of these transient sounds without boosting the sound as a whole, right? And getting all of the reflections and stuff that can be within a snare waveform. So I'll show you how to find this. Basically, like I said, I've done this with dynamic EQ, but instead I'll just go ahead and do it with regular so you can kind of see sort of how we sweep and find this. So I'm going to basically raise this band by about 10K until I find it, and then I'll dip that back down. So like I said, it usually starts around 700 or 800 up to like 3 or 4K tops. So I'll start at 700 here, and then we'll sweep until we find it. And a lot of this is just going to be ear training, but ultimately there is a specific sound with these contact point frequencies that you'll be able to identify moving forward. So I'll go ahead and play it. This is around what we've already boosted in the initial EQ, so I'll go ahead and sweep upward. Right there. The other ones, when they were boosted, of course you could hear the boost because it's 10 dB of boost, but basically with this, it's a different sound in that it sounds tight and sharp, right? Because these are the contact point frequencies that we're looking for. Ultimately, I'll go up a little further so you can kind of see, but the other frequencies when boosted don't make this sound, right? So I'll go ahead and play it again. Okay, so you can hear that those are boosted as well, but as I move back toward the contact point, you'll be able to hear sort of the meat and potatoes of the snare sound itself. Okay, so I wish I could give you, a magic frequency, to hit every time. Unfortunately, it's just not how it works, and you'll have to train your ear to do this yourself. However, that's if you're going to take notes, if you're going to remember for the future, it's usually between 700-800 hertz and 3 or 4K. So I'm going to dip this back down to about 3 or 4 dB of gain. So I don't want to boost it that much necessarily. I mean, that'll give it some more character, and that'll help some of those transient sounds stand out. Okay, so that's step 2. Step 3 is just like the hi-hat EQ video. It's a high shelf is what we're going to be adding here at the end. So you can, of course, do that within this EQ if you'd like, or whatever EQ you're using. And here, I'm just going to click this to make it a high shelf, and so you can see it makes it horizontal above whatever frequency I specify here. Now, what this is going to do is give the snare some polish by adding some shimmer or sheen or air or whatever you want to call those high frequencies. This is generally done about 8 or 9K and above, and this will give it sort of the tightness and those ticky sounds that are going to help it stand out in the mix without boosting all the other stuff. So I've got this boosted starting at about 8K, and I'll play it without it, of course, and then let you hear it with that shelf engaged, and you'll hear how much of a difference that it makes. Okay, I'm going to bring this up. Okay, so I've got about 6 dB of gain there on those high frequencies. It is, however, important to not overdo this step, because this is the one step in the process that if you boost too much, it'll ruin the entire sound and ruin your mix in the process. So the high shelf is done on pretty much every snare, and if you want to pare this down to just one step, this could probably be the one to do. This will help it stand out the most. But that's the 3-step process. I mean, I've got all 4 of these sounds routed to this one bus, of course. So I'll go ahead and play all 4 of these together with the bus EQ and stuff off. Kind of let you hear how that sounds, and then I'll show you what I did here with the bus with EQ, and that'll sort of round this out. So go ahead and play them dry. Okay, so I've processed all of these sounds before sending them to the bus. This is not totally dry, but that's what we're looking at here. So what I've done here with the bus, this allows me to manipulate all the sounds as a whole. Helps especially when you're like rounding out the mix at the end. I've got an RVox compressor here, which this is similar to an 1176 in some ways. Super fast attack, super fast release. It's going to boost, give it all some body. And then I've basically done the same thing on the bus that I did on the individual sounds. So I rolled off this low end. I boosted some of the low mids. It's dynamic EQ, so you'll see it in a second. I boosted some of the contact point frequencies, and then added a little bit more on the high shelf side. So I'll play it with those EQ changes. It gives it that tightness that we're looking for. Without. With. And it's little changes like that are going to make a huge difference. So as you continue learning, you'll start to figure out what some of those are, and you'll come up with your own sound as well, right? So everyone sounds a little bit different in the way that they mix. So I'll play these all together with the rest of the beat. I'll play them dry, and then I'll bring them in so you can hear it. You can hear how much the compressor does here, so I'll bring those in. And again, with the compressor, it's loud enough, but it doesn't shine through the mix. So I'll add these EQs, and you can hear the end result there. All right, so that'll just about do it. Again, just to summarize, step 1 is going to be cutting unwanted frequencies, usually on the low end and the mid-range. Step 2 is going to be boosting those contact point frequencies. And step 3 is high shelving to bring out some of the snare's inherent shimmer. So if you're interested in mixing and mastering services or one-on-one sessions for help with your beat or mix, feel free to hit up my website, which is producedbyvargo.com. If you signed up for the mailing list, I'll shoot you a coupon for whatever service that you're interested in. So thanks again for watching and supporting the channel, and hope you have a good one. All right, bye.